Whether it's 1080 AM, 99.5 HD2, the Odyssey app, twitch.tv/1080 AM The Fan, or youtube.com/1080 AM The Fan. Thanks, people. All right, Dan Lanning, he didn't take it to the grave. He took it to his press conference on Monday.
Much of the commentary world has decided.
Oh, no. Quick on the trigger there. I like that.
This time I had it ready.
Hey, there we go. No, Dan Lanning was asked by James Crepea, the Oregonian, about the 12 men on the field. Intentional or unintentional in the waning seconds of the Ohio State game. Remember, 10 seconds to go. Ohio State has one timeout. They're about 10 yards from field goal range. Oregon calls a timeout. They come out. They bring two defensive linemen on. Two defensive linemen come off. It looks like confusion is ensuing. They run on a 12th player about a second and a half before the play starts, and it leads to an incompletion, albeit away from where the player they ran on. Here's Dan Lanning and the question and response.
Much of the commentary world has decided and struck you as a genius, Dan, for the 12-man penalty and declared that it was intentional. Was it indeed intentional to induce the throw one-on-one against Jabbar in that spot?
He wasn't one-on-one. We actually had a safety on top. So there was so it's called dog. It's when you play, but he wasn't in extremely tight coverage, but he was in dog coverage where he had safety on top of him. And there was a timeout before that. We spent an inordinate amount of time on situations. There's some situations that don't show up very often in college football, but this is one that obviously was something that we had worked on. So you could see the result.
Oh, huh. Mm-hmm. Interesting breakdown from Dan Lanning. That now he was very specific in his wording. In that they look at all the situations. It was coming out of a timeout. Here's where the situation is like what Lanning felt the need to clarify there is that they tried to go to Jabbar Muhammad's side, which he was on the opposite sideline from where they brought in what was Dante Manning. And they tried to go to, as the reporter said, a one-on-one coverage. Lanning is saying, well, no, it wasn't. We had a safety over the top, so Jabbar could be, although playing soft, a little bit more aggressive, knowing there was help over the top to prevent a big play. So they had 2-over-1 over there, and then they had an additional defender on the other side of the field where that becomes an automatic for Will Howard, go away from it because they don't have the numbers over on that side of the field, right?
Sure.
That was the explanation from Dan Lanning.
Uh-huh.
Right there.
Mm-hmm. Look, there is absolutely no harm in embracing the narrative that Oregon's coaching staff deliberately put a 12th man on the field. There is not a negative thing that comes with that because everybody right now is extolling the virtues of how genius the Oregon coaching staff is. So why not run with it? I refuse to believe this is intentional. And that's not a shot at Oregon's coaching staff. It's not a shot at Dan Lanning because as a head coach, you cannot micromanage that in that situation. You can't. No head coach can. You might have somebody on the staff who does that for you, and every staff does have somebody who does that for you.
That's where that comes from, yeah.
And if you want to say that guy did, go with it. But sure, absolutely.
Well, and that's why he said that we prepare for all those situations and in that. The reactions on the field, whether it was, I believe it was Tyshim Johnson, who just kind of put his head down like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that, or the reactions from the sideline, it didn't seem intentional, but then if you look closely at the one guy who really didn't react, it was Lanning, but then I also kind of in the moment and in the time I was thinking, well, he's just thinking about the next play because now Ohio State is 5 to 7 yards from field goal range, and with the timeout they had the whole field open to them. To the premeditated nature of this has happened before. Coaches have implemented this and used this before. Rick Neuheisel, I know, came out and said yesterday it was used against him one time when he was coaching at UCLA. I mentioned yesterday Tom Coughlin did it as a coach of the New York Jets. I think Buddy Ryan did it as a head coach of the Eagles at times. It's not unprecedented. It's not something that he came up with and pulled out of his hat on his own. I honestly, I'm surprised that he came forward and was like, yeah, we did that on purpose. Right? Like, yeah,
Sure.
That's something that we prepare for. I thought that was going to be one where it's like, yeah, we're not going to talk about that ever
And that's what
again.
makes me believe that they're kind of leaning into it because there's nothing to lose here.
Well, the NCAA, according to Ross Dellinger, the Rules Committee is now taking a look at the rule itself,
Which they should.
saying that they believe the Big Ten officiating crew went and handled it the correct way
Based on what the ruling requires.
Yeah, and look, every single team, coach, player in the country, they try to find and exploit every loophole possible, right? Like as a receiver, yes, you are not supposed to push off and extend your arm, but if your elbow is in and you give him that chicken wing, you can create separation that way. That's within the rules. You run what we call a pick play, right?
Mm-hmm.
When you run a pick play, you look at that guy, you see him, you get in his way, but before you make contact, you better turn your head back and look back at the quarterback just to make sure you can say, I was making a play on the ball. I was just running my route. He just happened to be in the way there. All
These
of
things
these
happen.
things are every single play an offensive player is holding somewhere, right? It is every player, every coach, every team in the country tries to exploit the loopholes, and I know that there's people that feel like, well, that's unsportsmanlike to intentionally get a penalty like that. It was something that the Oregon Ducks, by Coach Lanning's assessment and what he said, it was something that they looked at and they said, this is the time to use it. And it is such a finite situation to do something like that I think it gets passed over a lot. And if you saw Ryan Day's reaction, head coach of Ohio State was like, they got 12, they got 12, they got 12. He was looking for those 5 free yards because they thought it was advantageous for them. It was a big gamble for Oregon.
Yeah.
I mean, no doubt about it. That is a huge gamble to say, you need 10 yards to get into
We're going to give you half.
field goal range. We're going to give you half and you have a timeout? Like, that is
That's one of those things where
ballsy.
if it goes the other way, Lanning is getting crushed for everything he did at UW that didn't work out for him times 10. Because this was at the end of the game in a situation, and it's going to be the narrative coming out of it is Dan Lanning doesn't know how to manage big moments if it blows up in his face.
Yeah. Yeah, but I think
that's the risk that you take there. And
but I
that's
think that is something he's not afraid of and hasn't been afraid
No,
of.
no, no.
Right?
I'm
Going
not saying
for
it's
it
a
on
bad-
fourth downs,
yeah,
and
no,
he
God,
continued
no.
to do it on fourth down.
Yeah.
I
He's
mean,
stuck by his guns for sure.
Yep.
And I think that's inherently who he is. But when you have it back, look, there's numbers and there's reality. And you have to know that when you're going with something on the numbers, things can happen. But you're going to go by the numbers. And if you're going to go by the numbers, you can't go away from it.
Yeah.
That's the whole point of analytics. You can't dabble. You have to stay committed to it because it's the whole idea of like when you flip a coin, it's a 50% chance that it's heads or tails. But I think most people think that if you flip it, it's just because you got tails one time, it means you have a better chance of getting heads the next time. You could get 50 tails in a row. It does not change the odds. That's the thing is like when you start getting into the actual analytics of things and percentage chances, you have to understand that even if it's something says it went your way, it's going to go your way 9 times out of 10, it could go against you 9 times out of 10, and the numbers could still be right. And that's what I think when you're trying to explain that to fans, whether it's Oregon fans or college football fans in general, they don't have that fundamental understanding. But if it had gone against Dan, he would have gotten absolutely murdered for it. So, again, which is why I think that owning it and taking ownership of the situation has zero negative effect on them. But in all reality, it's probably going to be a rule that gets revisited and changed because it should not negatively impact. If at all, the offensive team should have the ability to decline or to accept the runoff.
Yeah, to in that moment say, well, no, we're not gonna go with a 10 or the 4 seconds
the
that
play,
we lost
yes.
need to be
Put back on the
put
clock.
back on the clock.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean
It could be a situation where let's say they were already 5 yards closer, and the penalty got them 5 yards in. Now they're in kicking range. Now they don't want those seconds back.
no.
You know what I mean?
No.
Like then you go, no, you go keep those. We're gonna go ahead and kick the field goal, and there's less time on the clock now. Like, you know what I mean? I think that's the situation. Like you need to afford the offensive team that situation.
Yeah, well, Ohio State didn't because that's not the rule right now, and the Ducks come out with a 32-31 win. I'm surprised he did. I love that he did come out and say it because I think that's outstanding that he came out and was just like the way he said it was very, very, very
Particular.
I mean, he chose his words very wisely.
He did not go up
in the
there
way that he said
unprepared.
it.
Let's go down that path.
He knew it was going to happen.
Yeah. Real quick before you toss the next break, I have confirmation. We will be joined by back-to-back national champion head coach of the University of Connecticut Huskies, Dan Hurley, at 2:30 today.
Oh, hey, look at that.
Babe.
All right. Okay. Well, look at that.